Joni Mitchell, one of the most influential artists of our times. Morrissey, a singer and songwriter on the cutting edge of today's music. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Words and Music, featuring an interview with the legendary Joni Mitchell in a fascinating, freewheeling conversation with Morrissey. Joni Mitchell's international fans can be numbered in the millions, and her impact on music heard in the works of scores of today's top stars. Among them, acclaimed British vocalist and recording artist Morrissey, who counts Joni as one of his most important and enduring influences. On the occasion of the release of Hits and Misses, the Reprise Records compilation of the best of Joni Mitchell, Morrissey and the artist got together for a rare, candid, and wide-ranging chat over tea and cigarettes. Ladies and gentlemen, Joni Mitchell and Morrissey.
Driving into town with the dark cloud above you, dialing the number who's bound to love you. Oh, honey, you turn me on. I'm a radio, I'm a country station. I'm a little bit corny, I'm a wildflower waiting for you.
Do they still refer to you as a female songwriter because it's such a ludicrous... it's become such a ludicrous title, and because to be called a female songwriter
implies limitations.
Well, it implies that it's not a real songwriter.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't imagine, for instance, saying Paul McCartney is a great male songwriter.
Right. Well, they wouldn't do it that way. But I mean, this has always been true of women in the arts. We supposedly made some progress in this century. We got the vote, for one thing. But if you take the female impressionists, there were several of them that were very good, and they were not really allowed to belong to the Academy. There was an extra A in front of their name, Associates of the Academy. So, and it was said of them that they were incapable of really tackling the important issues that men could tackle, that, you know, not that the subject matter of the Impressionists was particularly important, it was just mostly delightful, it seemed to me. People boating, people on beaches, you know, landscapes, so on.
Yeah.
But they seemed to think that women could only handle domestic situations, and Mary Cassatt painted women and children very beautifully, and that seemed to confirm it, but she had all the chops that they did. One would think in this time period that I came along, mind you, there weren't very many women writing and singing. There weren't very as many women as there are in the business now, definitely.
Yes.
There are only a few of us.
But to use the expression female songwriter is to imply that the word songwriter belongs to men.
Yes.
So do they still in this country call you a female songwriter?
Well, they tend to lump me always with groups of women. You know, the women of rock. I've been always lumped in. I always thought, well, they don't put Dylan with the men of rock. Why do they do that with me, with the women of rock? Always within the context of the women that were happening. Within every decade, I would get lumped in that same manner. One of my favorite compliments that I ever received was from a black blind piano player, Henry. I don't know what his last name was. And he said to me, Joni, you know, you make genderless, raceless music. And I thought, well, I hadn't set out, you know, saying, I'm going to make genderless, raceless music. But in some part of the back of my mind, I did want to make music that crossed. I never really liked lines, class lines, you know, like social structure lines, since childhood. And there were a lot of them that they tried to teach me as a child. Don't go there. Why not? Well, because they're not like us. You know, they try to teach you those lines. They start at about 12. And I ignored them always and proceeded without thinking that I was a male or a female or anything, that I knew these people that wrote songs and I was one of them.
Are you aware of sexist language? Is it something that you're constantly checking, or not particularly?
I'm not a real feminist. I've become a little more so as I've gotten older. But I didn't pay much attention to it, but there were a lot of women trying to conscript me into it. And the way that they did it was so vulgar that I'd go, because I always preferred men's company from childhood. I played Well, not all boys. I had a difficult time being a creative child to play the girl because male games were very role oriented. If I played cowboys with them, I had to be Dale Evans and stay home and cook. You know, if I played with the girls, we were into my dolly wets and yours doesn't, and I have nicer dishes than you have. So the best playmates that I had were creative kids, and they grew up to be classical musicians, and both of them were gay. You know, grew up to be gay, and there was no role playing. I'm going to be a great ballerina, I'm going to be a great composer. There was a lot of boasting, but there was no one saying that we were boasting, you know. So we were free to dream our grand dreams in terms of our play.
Yesterday a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of a star. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the pains of ponies go up and down. We're captive on a carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in a circle again. Then the child moved 10 times round the seasons, skated over 10 clear frozen streams. Words like, when you're older, must appease him, and promises of someday make his dream.
Don't you find that if your music is confessional and aims towards being intellectual, that you have to explain yourself repeatedly and in much more depth than anybody who makes nonsensical, throwaway, useless music?
Oh yeah, they come after you, you know, definitely. But first of all, I don't think of myself as confessional. I would call myself a penitent of spirit, not a confessor. The point is not to confess, and the things where I have revealed my own foibles or frailty were generally within the context of the work, in order to create first a very human character, and therefore a rich character full of human experience. You have to work with the fodder that you have. I've also used the songwriting process as an investigation of self-analysis of sorts, but not just for the sake of spilling my guts or taking off my clothes, so to speak, in public. It had to have something accompanying it in order for me to think of it as a work of art, and therefore something I'm proud to present, because I'm not necessarily showing myself in a particularly flattering light, not in the pop arena. Like Blue Album was, people were kind of shocked at the intimacy and the revelation of that, and it was peculiar in the pop arena at that time, because you were supposed to be bigger than life and portraying yourself bigger than life. I think did it partially. I remember having this thought, well, if they're going to worship me, because it had sort of begun, they should know who they're worshiping. It was some kind of, I didn't want a deception, and I also didn't want the inequity of being on a pedestal. So I wanted to create a persona, not that was actual, that was really who I was, you know, so that if I had any insight, because I took this job very responsible, to pass on, since I had a public voice, I felt I better be presenting something nourishing and useful. But if I do it with a certain kind of voice, I will be mistaken for some kind of guru, you know, and I'm no guru. I'm muddling around here with everybody else. Therefore, the character must deliver the light as it emerges from darkness. It's got to be a balanced portrait. I never wanted to act the part of a poet, you know, like to be so always pearls of language and wisdom were falling from my lips. The first time I met Prince, you know, I put together 2 very unruly sentences in the course of the night, and he corrected, said, "A poet like you," and I said, "Oh God, like I have to." Well, I think I said, "I'm tired," or are you tired or are you hungry? I think I said, "I'm tireder than I am hungry." It was some grammatical error. That still sounds right to me. But Prince corrected me, and I said, "Oh God, I have to play the poet."
It's coming on Christmas. They're cutting down trees. They're putting up reindeer and singing songs of joy and peace. Oh, I wish I had a river I could skate away on. But it don't snow here. It stays pretty green. I'm gonna make a lot of money, then I'm gonna quit this crazy scene. I wish I had a river I could skate away on. I wish I had a river so long I would teach my feet to fly. Oh, I wish I had a river I could skate away on. I made my baby cry.
Joni myth number 72. Well, no, not really. But a small marginal footnote in British pop history is the fact that the Sex Pistols sacked their original bass player, Glenn Matlock, reportedly because he listened to your music. Now, were you aware of this?
No.
This was a press statement that did the rounds at the time, which is very amusing to me because I saw the Sex Pistols a few times before they made records, and I thought they were great. And also, it was the time when you were most influencing me, and so I found it very interesting that the Sex Pistols and Joni Mitchell were supposed to, and in between there was supposed to be this massive divide, which I couldn't
There
see
wasn't.
at all.
When I met Johnny Rotten, I met him in Jamaica, and again I looked at him and I thought I liked him immediately. He was a lot like I was. He was younger, but he was a lot like I was in high school, fashion conscious. There he sat, in his red suede shoes and his black woolly 50s revival.
Yes.
In his Anderson plaid or a turquoise with red in it plaid jacket in the Jamaican heat, all kind of pale and pimply,
Yes.
avoiding the sun. And they had come to. He had a friend who was London Rasta. He had a dread friend who was his photographer or something, and they had come to meet the Rasta contingency. So we went somewhere and played back music, and I played Don Juan's Reckless Daughter, which I just completed. And Johnny had some comments to make, which I don't quite recall now, but he took a couple of stabs at it, but his friend said, "Oh, it makes me want to eat white people." I remember that, because of all of the drummings and everything on it. But I really, I'm a punk. I've always, I have that irreverence and that. I've always been on the outside. I've never really been on the mainstream.
But
not that to be a punk is a good thing necessarily. I mean,
well, it can be.
But I am one.
But there seem to me to be 3 very definite shades to your career, or very defined periods. The late 60s, early 70s were very different from the trio of albums, Hissing of Summer Lawns, Hejira, and Don Juan's Reckless Daughter. And then what followed after Mingus, I think, was a very different you also. There seems to be three different people somewhere along the line. Mm-hmm. That's my view. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it.
No, I agree.
And is Mingus your ugly duckling?
Oh, not at all. No. I mean, I got to play with, that band that was my favorite band of Miles's. With the exception, Ron Carter was replaced by Jaco Pastorius. So I got to play, it's all live, You know, I got to play with the band of my favorite band in the world, right? And it's the only jazz. Everybody accuses me of being, you know, my music is not jazz, but it is. Jazz is one of the tributaries that makes up my music, and I've borrowed some things from it, but any jazzer will tell you, you know, I'm not in the idiom. My chord harmonic sense is different. A lot is different, but there are elements that wouldn't be there if I hadn't loved certain pockets of Miles's playing, for instance, and Lambert Hendricks and Ross for another. They've leaked into it, but I've taken folk structure from Dylan, and you know, so you got a new thing going, and it doesn't belong to any camp really, but it's got a little bit of classical music in it. It's got it's got a lot of tributaries.
Of the darkness in men's minds, what can you say that wasn't marked by history or the TV news today? He gets away with murder. The blizzards come and go, the stab and glare and buckshot of the heavy, heavy snow. It comes and goes, it comes and goes.
You have an extraordinary balance, a beautiful balance with words. You never have lines jutting out or anything awkward. It's all very sandpapered, very finely. And that's the thing I most enjoy about your work. Are you a word snob? Are there any words that you would never use?
Well, I don't think I'm prejudiced against words per se, except the ones that come up through psychology, you know, because they've ruined the English language. Neurotic, ego, I don't like those words, you know, all of the psychological words. You know, I see them bandied around and think, that damn word has killed a lot of words that because they've taken the heart out of life in a certain way. Like neurotic, doctors love to levy that at just about every woman that crosses their threshold, right? Did you ever stop to think, she's anxious? You know, like there are other things that have more compassion and more understanding to them. Yes. So most of the psychological words I don't like. I went and had trouble with God for a while. As a matter of fact, I cornered Bob Dylan at a party in Austin one time and said, you know, you're always throwing that word God in. What does God mean to you? You know, and he said, it's just a word that people use. I said, yeah, but you're using it. What does it mean to you? He couldn't answer it. Then he went through his born again thing, and about 3 years later he came up to me and he said, Joni, remember the time you asked me about God and the devil? Well, I'll tell you now. And he launched into some real Christian rhetoric. You know, I said, no, I didn't ask you about the devil. You know, it's God that I was having a problem with the word. Not that I was an atheist, but I couldn't tell in the Old Testament God from the devil. They were both vain and violent. You know, I couldn't get a grasp on this concept. That's a word that went dead for a while. Words go dead and then they come back.
Words and Music will be back with more of Joni Mitchell and Morrissey after this.
Back in 1957, we had to dance a foot apart, and they hawk-eyed us from the sidelines, holding their rulers without a heart. And so with just a touch of our fingers, we could make our circuit re-explode. All we ever wanted was just to come in from the cold. Come in, oh, coming from the cold. Ooh, come in, coming from the cold. We really thought we had a purpose.
You mentioned somewhere that Prince had been introduced to you at the time of the hitting of Summer Lawns.
Well, I saw him in an audience at that time. He was in Minneapolis. I believe it was him, front row to the left, quite conspicuous because he's got those eyes like a puffin, you know, those Egyptian eyes, those big, exotic eyes.
In truth, I must say it was the first album that completely captivated me, and it's never actually left me to this day, which is a long 21 years to live with a record.
Was that the first one that you came in on? Or?
No. The first one I came in on was Blue. For me, an extraordinary record, and I just imagine that as long as I listen to music, I will listen to that record, and the two which followed it, which I found quite daunting, really. Especially, I think, Don Juan's Reckless Daughter, which still mesmerises me. Everything about that record completely mesmerises me. And when I first saw the lyric sheet and the vastness of these words, I actually had to close the record and thought, you know, I have to leave this for another day. This is just a monster. Do you feel that way about those albums? Are they dear to you?
Well, I was very, you know, after Court and Spark, which was my 6th album, you know, see, I had 5 without really a band. There was no real chance of airplay or, you know, without the bottom end on it, right? And it took me that long to get my band. So I get my band. The record has some commercial success, some nominations, and it's viewed as a kind of a peak. After that, okay, because I was so long to develop 6 albums, that's as much a run as people get in the public eye without... Your name is boring. It doesn't matter what you do after that. But I was still in a state of growth, right? So then I thought, okay, you know, like Hissing of Summer Lawns, I thought was still going forward. I recognized that it was a little experimental. It hadn't quite leveled out yet, and there were things that I was craving. I was craving the bottom end to do certain things, and I couldn't find the right players until Jocko came along to agree with my idea of what that part of the music should do. They wouldn't take the chances that I asked. Then Hejira was a kind of a cleansing process. Most of it was written on a solo drive. You know, I drove across country with a couple of friends, and I drove back. Took my time. Very pensive driving across America. That's when most of that was written. So it's a good driving across America album.
Yes.
A lot of people that have driven across, like young musicians coming from Detroit to LA that took it with them and drove, they really get the full-bodied feeling of that piece because you're coming through those deserts, and it comes more to life if you take the same journey, you know. I'm traveling in some vehicle. I'm sitting in some cafe, a defector from the petty wars that shall shut love away. There's comfort in melancholy,
when there's no need to explain. It's just as natural as the weather in this moody sky today. In our possessive coupling, so much could not be expressed. So now I am returning to myself. These things that you and I suppressed, I see something of myself in everyone, just at this moment of the world. The snow gathers like bolts of lace, waltzing on a ballroom girl.
Well, a lot of your songs are very filmic in the sense that you begin by describing the weather or the scenery, and then you get stuck into the story, or whatever it is you have to relate.
Well, see, the music, too, is like scoring for a film. Like, usually get the music first, and there'll be a pocket of it, like the A section, you'll say, okay, the A section will hold descriptive, just the way the music is, it'll hold descriptive language. But when we get to the B, look how the melody is here. The language must be direct, you know, no poetry. Just clean in, you know, like you got a lot of nerve to say, you are my friend. Boom. You know, like theatrical monologue, you know. And now the music here, the way the chords are drifting and everything, will allow for descriptive passage again. Here again, the music will not. It's angular and requires, you know, so there's that part to the art too. And the music dictates a lot of that.
I know you don't like to talk about the plethora of junior Jonis, but I must be allowed to at least make one comment about it, because it has become so incredibly prevalent, your influence. Do you ever listen to the radio and hear yourself?
Not as much as others do.
Oh, come on, that's a direct lift from something I've done.
People tell me all the time that is, but I don't really hear it. I mean, I'll hear a thing here and there. Even Prince, you know, like, who's an interesting hybrid, who's taken some things from here, so he claims, but his influences are, it's me and Sly. Now you take me and Sly and hybrid that, you're going to get something quite unique, because he played back, I think it was Paisley Park. I went to a playback here, and there was a harmonic passage in one of the songs that really interested me, and I said to him, oh, you know, where's that coming from? Because it sounded fresh to me, you know, and he said, you know, and I couldn't hear it, but time went by and I heard something, and it was, the reason I couldn't hear it was because it was something that Larry Carlton played against my architecture, which I'm very familiar with, and I'm familiar with what I added also, but yeah, he'd taken something between those two things, you know what I'm saying? But a lot of, there was a radio show that was given to me, assuming that I would be flattered by it, that I found greatly insulting, where this guy had rounded up a lot of young women, only one of them who I could tell you who it was, and I can see a little of my influence, but on her, not to name names, but a lot of Joan Baez and a lot of Bonnie Raitt also, and maybe more so. And anyway, what the radio show claimed, and it was, I think it was an hour long, was all these young women had been listening to me, and you could even tell which album they'd gotten hung up on, and this one was hung up on Court and Spark, and then he played something. To me, it bore no resemblance to Court and Spark. This one was hung up on this, and to me it was, and I found it insulting that they would, you know, because harmonically it was very standard tuning. It was the very thing that I left to get away from, you know, in standard tuning. It seemed to me that it had been mined out. No matter what colors you put together, you heard it. It was like it had all been laid out. So by twiddling the strings and going off on this adventure into the unknown, you coughed up fresh chordal progressions and so on, to get away from that. So to hear these girls being likened to the thing that I had, before I had begun my recording career, abandoned, you know. And then, to add insult to injury, at the end he said, these women are all beating her at her own game, and check this out, she doesn't know what a melody is anymore. And he played the Reoccuring Dream, which is a choral piece, and also full of montage and satire, and, you know. And I thought, well, God, you know, that's no illustration of loss of perspective. That's growth, you know. I mean, you can't. It's a choral piece, you know. It's counter melodies.
This is the reoccurring dream, born in the dreary gap between what we have now and what we wish we could have.
More fulfilling and less frustrating.
Out of the envy in our eyes, glamorous picture people rise, gleaming us down from screens and pages.
Glamour before your very eyes.
Isn't it true? Isn't it true?
Good question. I know. I care.
Look here, they tell you, if you had this, if you had that.
Latest styles and colors.
If we had that for us, wouldn't it be fabulous? If you had that postcard bottle jar, lovers would look like different stars.
What are your youth secrets for stars? Call now. Just $9.99.
Our discontent is their delight. They offer relief for the purchase price. Love in a bottle. Love on for
Is that our new contract?
Isn't it true? Isn't it true?
Guaranteed. Pick up your phone and
See, do they sell you? If you had this, if you had that.
I want a new truck.
If you use the shampoo, true love will come if to you. Had that postcard bottle jar, your lovers would look like.
Well, there's a great toughness within you, which I think is overlooked. I mean, you know, this very old image of you as, you know, the daughter who never left home, the daughter who's upstairs in her bedroom playing your guitar, I think is just so annoying and such a dated concept, and repeatedly writers regurgitate it and so forth. And I just think, you know, are you really listening to these records? Do you not really hear the strong woman? And
it's a saga, isn't it? I mean, if you look at it, because there is a lot of autobiography and really deep changes in terms of psychological, like a good short story should have. Like the premise of a good short story is your central character goes through a change.
But are you allowed to change within music?
No, you're not allowed to change within show business. You get typecast. So I was a vulnerable, young, very feminine creature.
Yes.
And I couldn't survive that way, and I broke down in a certain way. And when I came back with some tooth. It's like Marilyn Monroe turned into Barbara Stanwyck. So nobody could really get used to this padded-shouldered female that emerged, and they rejected her. And it was quite a different persona, and it wasn't a contrived persona either.
No,
it was
growth.
Indigenous growth,
Yeah.
you know. And I've gone through a lot of, you know, so maybe that's a little too edgy, and now you've got to temper that, and you know, balancing my male-female. It's a man's business. Rather than complain about that, you have to hold your own.
Yes.
You have to develop some strength. You can't just go fluttering through it like Madame Butterfly.
No. Who are your favourite poets?
I don't like poetry. Never liked it. I always smelt a rat. I could always like see the poetic stance in a lot of it. I like some Yeats. You know, I like sonically a lot of Yeats, and I like his craft. I set one Yeats poem to music, but I disagreed with a couple of ideas in him, and I put in some qualifications, and I rewrote the part that I thought he hadn't really finished. I think he just... It's my assumption.
That's very kind of you.
that he got caught up in the modern and left his first draft kind of sloppy because it was hip to leave the petticoat. This is my assumption, so I rewrote it in the style that he started his first stanza with, like to put back. Did what I thought he would do if he finished it.
Do films inspire songs within you?
I'm trying to think if I've written from a film. Maybe a line here or there. I know Dylan said to me at one point that he couldn't write anymore, and I said, oh, what about this and what about that? And he said, oh, the box wrote it. I said, what do you mean the box? We said, well, I write down things from movies and things I heard people say, and I throw them in the box. I said, I don't care where you got your bits and pieces, you still put them all together. I'm sure I've taken like Clouds was inspired by a moment in a book where this guy's up in a plane looking down at clouds, and I was reading the book up in a plane looking down at clouds. Put the book down. Henderson the Rain King. That song came from some little bit of Henderson the Rain King. I'm sure I've got little bits of movies in there, but I can't think of one right now.
Rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all.
If you sing sad songs and very strong songs, very powerful, meaningful songs, do you think the audience, your audience, feel all the better if they get the sense that you walk off the stage and you take the sadness with you, rather than perhaps you walk off the stage, jump on a Harley and fly down the highway or freeway?
Well, it depends on the individual. Like, case in point, this girl came up to me and said, "Hi, Joni." I was sitting in a sidewalk cafe smoking, somewhere, and I'm kind of open to public encounter when I do that, especially alone, I'm a fan of your music. I love your music. I'm a manic depressive. I like your music, but I hate pictures of you. Every time I see you, you're smiling, and it makes me so mad. So there's a person who thinks, like, I'm suffering, she's suffering, and if they see evidence otherwise, then they feel that I'm unauthentic.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel more ambidextrous. I suffer, I enjoy, I suffer, I enjoy.
Yes. So you think there's a certain section of your audience who might feel cheated if they see you happy?
I think there is that possibility. That's a shame, but I think that there are those out there, yeah.
Although your songs have never, to me, been depressing.
No, I hope not.
Because, songs can't really be depressing because the actual act of writing a song is so positive, so how could it ever really be depressing? But you have such an openness of heart that it can be construed as being sad. And
what's wrong with being sad?
Nothing at all.
That's what's wrong, I think. Well, that's what we have to learn, like that the Hungarians know, and the Czechoslovakians, and people who live long under siege. The Irish, I suspect, know. They should know if they don't. That the world is not a smile button, and great art and literature has to embrace all kinds of things.
I was an unmarried girl. I just turned 27. But they sent me to the sisters for the way men looked at me.